In 1949, Cadillac did something that seemed almost impossible for a company known for quiet luxury. It built a V8 that racers immediately wanted to abuse. Under the long hood of America's most prestigious cars sat 331 cubic inches of overhead valve engineering. It was lighter, more compact, and far more modern than the flathead engines Cadillac had been using before it. And almost immediately, people started asking the question Cadillac probably didn't want to hear. What happens if you take this engine out of a luxury car and build a race car around it? Most people remember Cadillac as the company of enormous fins, soft seats, chrome grills, and silent cruising. But what almost nobody remembers is that Cadillac's new V8 became a weapon in the hands of racers. It went to NASCAR, it went to Indianapolis, it went to Le Mans, and then, just as the performance race was getting serious, the American auto industry pulled the plug. The strange part is that Cadillac didn't lose because its V8 wasn't good enough. It was almost the opposite. The engine had become too interesting, and the story of how that happened begins with one of the most important American engines of the post-war era. The engine that changed everything before 1949, Cadillac's V8 technology was still tied heavily to the flathead era. That was about to change. Cadillac engineers had spent years applying lessons from wartime engine development, and the result was a completely new overhead valve V8. The basic engine displaced 331.1 cubic inches, or about 5.4 liters. Bore was 3.8125 inches. Stroke was 3.625 inches. It used 5 main bearings, hydraulic lifters, and a cast iron block. But the numbers don't tell the whole story. This wasn't some gigantic, slow-revving luxury engine. The relatively short stroke helped keep piston speed under control, while the overhead valve layout allowed the breathing system to become much more efficient than the old flathead design. The old flathead V8s had a fundamental problem. The valves sat beside the cylinders, not above them. Exhaust gases had to make a tortured journey out of the combustion chamber. It was like trying to breathe through a straw. The overhead valve design changed everything. Now the valves sat directly in the combustion chamber. The intake charge could flow straight down into the cylinder. The exhaust could flow straight up and out. The path of least resistance became the actual path, and that meant power, lots of it. The first versions were rated around 160 horsepower depending on specification, with roughly 312 pound-feet of torque. That's not an impressive number by modern standards. In 1949, it was a different story. Cadillac had just put a modern V8 into production that was roughly 200 pounds lighter than the flathead V8 it replaced. And racers noticed immediately. Then the hot rodders got their hands on it. And that's when Cadillac's carefully engineered luxury engine started developing a second personality. When luxury meets speed. Because the 331 wasn't designed as a pure racing engine. It was designed to move big Cadillacs, heavy cars with automatic transmissions, power steering, power brakes, air conditioning, leather seats, thick carpets, and enough chrome to build a small monument. These weren't lightweight sports cars, they were rolling living rooms, but give that engine better breathing, more aggressive tuning, lighter cars, and a driver willing to stay in the throttle, suddenly the same V8 looked very different. In 1952, Cadillac added 4-barrel carburation to the 331, and output climbed to 190 horsepower with 322 pound-feet of torque. In 1953, compression rose to 8.25, 1 horsepower reached 210. By 1954, the 331 was making 230 horsepower. And for 1955, the final year of the 331, Cadillac pushed the standard version to 250 horsepower and 345 pound-feet. The high-performance Eldorado version went even further, reaching 270 horsepower. Every year, Cadillac was discovering that the basic architecture could handle more compression, more carburation, more breathing, more power. But there was a problem. Cadillac was building a luxury engine. Racers were treating it like a race engine, and one man in particular saw what it could become. His name was Briggs Cunningham. the man who took Cadillac racing Cunningham, wasn't interested in building another comfortable American cruiser. He wanted to prove that American engineering could compete with Europe's best sports cars. He was a sportsman racer with serious resources and even more serious ambitions. And he had a theory. European racing cars were lighter, more agile, more sophisticated in their chassis design. But their engines were smaller, less torque-rich, and often more fragile. American engines, especially the new overhead valve V8s, had massive low-end torque and durability that European engines couldn't match. What if you combined American power with a lighter chassis? So in 1950, he took Cadillac-powered to the most intimidating endurance race on Earth. The 24 Hours of Le Mans. 2 Cadillac Series 61S appeared at the race. One looked almost like a normal Cadillac. The other looked completely insane. It was nicknamed Le Monstre. Cunningham had stripped away the normal body and replaced it with a much lighter, lower aluminum body wrapped around a tubular structure. The shape was crude-looking by European standards, but there was a purpose behind it. Reduce drag, reduce weight. Get the Cadillac V8 moving. The second car, known as Petit Pateau, stayed much closer to its production appearance and used a Cadillac 5.4-liter V8 with racing modifications. Cadillac's own history confirms that the two cars were entered in the 1950 Le Mans race, with Petit Pateau finishing 10th overall and Le Monstre finishing 11th. Even more interestingly, the Cadillac-powered Allard J2 finished 3rd overall. Think about that for a second. A Cadillac engine in a European endurance classic against purpose-built sports cars from Ferrari, Talbot Lago, and Aston Martin, running for 24 hours straight on a circuit that included the Mulsanne Straight, where reliability and power mattered as much as handling. And one Cadillac-powered Allard finished on the podium. That wasn't supposed to happen. The Cadillac V8 had just demonstrated something important. The engine didn't need to be born in a racing department to become competitive. It needed the right environment. And racers were about to give it one. The American racing revolution. The same thing was happening back home. In 1949, Indy driver Paul Russo won the Milwaukee 100 stock car race in a Cadillac. In 1950, Red Byron finished 3rd in the NASCAR Southern 500 at Darlington. Then in June 1951, Gober Sosby took pole position and finished 2nd in a 100-mile NASCAR Grand National race at Columbus, Georgia. These weren't flukes. These were consistent performances that demonstrated something racers already suspected. The Cadillac 331 had the goods. It had torque for corner exit. It had durability for long races. It had parts availability because Cadillac was building thousands of these engines for regular production cars. And it had enough performance potential that privateers could tune them without exotic equipment or factory support. Cadillac wasn't officially transforming its luxury division into a NASCAR operation. Privateers were simply taking the hardware Cadillac had already built and finding ways to make it faster. And that distinction matters. Because Cadillac's V8 wasn't some secret factory race motor built in limited numbers for homologation purposes. It was something arguably more dangerous to the competition. It was a production engine that racers could actually get their hands on. Walk into any Cadillac dealership, buy a wrecked Cadillac, pull the engine, build a race car around it. The 331 had a compact architecture, strong low-end torque, overhead valves, and enough breathing potential to respond to modifications. A racer could change the intake, change the carburation, change the exhaust, increase compression, modify the camshaft, and suddenly the engine that had been designed to quietly push a Cadillac down a boulevard could be made to behave very differently. The Allard connection. One famous example was Fred Wacker's Cadillac-powered Allard. The 1950 Allard J2 was fitted with a Cadillac 331, and Cadillac engineer Frank Burrell became involved in developing special performance hardware for the engine, including a dual-quad intake arrangement. The Allard J2 was a British-built sports car with a lightweight chassis and simple, functional bodywork. It was designed from the beginning to accept large American V8 engines. Sidney Allard had figured something out before most people. American V8s were cheap, powerful, and available. British chassis were light and handled well. Put them together and you had a recipe for something seriously fast. Now you had a lightweight sports car wrapped around an American V8 with serious torque. The J2 weighed around 2,400 pounds. A stock Cadillac weighed nearly 4,500 pounds. Same engine, half the weight. You can do the math. And that's when the European establishment started having a problem, because the old assumption was simple. Europe had the racing machinery. America had the big luxury cars, but the Cadillac V8 was beginning to blur that line. And then the engine kept getting better. The evolution continues. By 1955, the 331 had reached 250 horsepower in standard form with a 9.01 compression ratio. The Eldorado version reached 270 horsepower. For an engine pushing 5.5 liters, those numbers might sound ordinary today. In the mid-1950s, they were serious, and the torque was the real story. 345 pound-feet arriving at relatively low engine speed meant the Cadillac could shove a heavy car forward with authority. It didn't need to scream to 7,000 revolutions per minute. It didn't need exotic fuel. It just needed throttle. And it delivered power in a wide, fat band that made it easy to use in racing conditions. That was useful on a road course. It was useful on an oval. And it was extremely useful in a drag race. The early drag racing scene was just beginning to develop in the early 1950s. Dry lake beds in California, abandoned airport runways, straight stretches of empty highway, and the Cadillac 331 was perfect for it. Big displacement, big torque, tough construction, bolt on some headers, recurve the distributor, add more carburation, and you had a legitimate drag racing engine. The horsepower war begins. But the more manufacturers chased horsepower, the more the entire American automobile industry began changing. Chevrolet had performance engines. Ford had performance engines. Pontiac was getting aggressive. Oldsmobile was already famous for the Rocket V8. Chrysler had introduced its legendary Hemi in 1951. And Cadillac was sitting on an engine that racers had proven could compete. The horsepower race was becoming a war. Every year brought new advertisements screaming about more power, more cubic inches, higher compression, multiple carburetors. Performance was becoming a marketing weapon, and manufacturers were using it to sell cars. The problem was that it was working. Young buyers wanted the fastest car, dealers wanted the bragging rights, and the marketing departments wanted ammunition, so engineering departments kept pushing. Then came 1957. And suddenly, the war was supposed to stop. The ban that changed everything. The Automobile Manufacturers Association adopted a voluntary ban on manufacturer-supported racing activity. The idea was to discourage the escalating factory competition that had turned horsepower into a marketing weapon. There were concerns about safety, concerns about insurance costs, concerns about the public perception that automakers were encouraging dangerous driving, and concerns that the horsepower war was spiraling out of control. For Cadillac, this was devastating because the company didn't need to officially build race cars for its V8 to have an impact. Racers were already using Cadillac power. But now the manufacturers were stepping back. The timing could hardly have been worse. The 1950s horsepower race had reached a fever pitch. Manufacturers were advertising power, performance, acceleration, and increasingly extreme engines. Then the industry effectively said, enough. The result was not that Cadillac's V8 suddenly became mechanically illegal. It didn't. The engine could still power Cadillac automobiles. Private racers could still modify engines. What disappeared was the growing factory-backed environment that could have pushed Cadillac's performance development much further. No more official racing teams. No more factory-sponsored competition. No more engineers developing racing parts on company time. The privateers could still race, but the factory door had closed. And that's where the title becomes so ironic. The V8 that racers had discovered was effectively pushed away from the very performance culture it had helped create. Cadillac had produced the hardware, racers had demonstrated what it could do, and then the corporate world changed the rules, the hidden legacy. But here's the part most people miss. The racing ban didn't erase the engineering lessons. They stayed inside the company. They stayed inside GM. and they stayed inside the minds of the people building high-performance American engines. The knowledge of what worked on a racetrack didn't disappear, it just went underground. Engineers still knew what modifications increase power. They still understood what racing had taught them about durability. They still had the data from competition. The 331 itself continued to evolve through the mid-1950s. Cadillac increased displacement to 365 cubic inches for 1956, and then 390 cubic inches for 1959. Power kept climbing. The philosophy was clear: more displacement, better breathing, higher compression, more power. By 1959, the 390 cubic inch Cadillac V8 was producing 325 horsepower in standard form and 345 horsepower in the Eldorado. But Cadillac's racing story had already become something larger than one engine. It had proven that American luxury car engineering could survive in an environment where speed mattered more than comfort. The Le Mans legacy at Le Mans in 1950, the Cadillac-powered machines had gone up against European sports cars and come home with respectable results. The Allard, powered by Cadillac, finished third overall. That mattered, because racing isn't just about winning. Sometimes it's about proving that something can belong. And Cadillac had proven that its V8 belonged on a racetrack. The Le Mans finish demonstrated that American V8 power could run for 24 hours at racing speeds without exploding, that it could compete with European machinery on European soil, that the fundamental engineering was sound. It was a statement that echoed through the racing world. There was another important consequence. The 331 became beloved by hot rodders. The hot rod revolution. Its size, torque, durability, and relatively compact design made it an attractive engine for custom builds and early American performance projects. The same engine that once lived under the hood of a Cadillac sedan could suddenly find itself inside something much lighter. A chopped and channeled 1932 Ford, a custom roadster, a Lakester built for Bonneville. And once you remove hundreds of pounds of luxury equipment from the equation, 331 cubic inches of V8 starts feeling very different. The hot rod community had discovered that Cadillac engines were available in junkyards, cheap to buy, and packed with potential. And because Cadillac built so many cars, parts were everywhere. Need a water pump? Easy. Need pistons? Available. Need machine work? Any shop could handle it. That's the hidden truth behind this engine. Cadillac didn't need to build a dedicated race motor. It accidentally built a motor that racers could turn into one. And that distinction is what makes the story so fascinating. Why the 331 was different. The engine wasn't exotic. It wasn't a hand-built Formula One masterpiece requiring a team of Italian mechanics. It wasn't a fragile European jewel that needed constant attention and expensive maintenance. It was cast iron, 5 main bearings, hydraulic lifters, overhead valves, a big American V8 designed for a luxury automobile. And somehow, that was enough. Enough to go racing, enough to run at Le Mans, enough to take a Cadillac-powered Allard to third overall, enough to make NASCAR teams pay attention, enough to win races on American ovals, and enough to demonstrate that Cadillac's engineering department had far more performance potential than the brand's image suggested. The end of an era. Then the era ended. The 331 disappeared after 1955, replaced by larger Cadillac V8s. The AMA racing withdrawal reduced the factory involvement that might have taken Cadillac racing even further, and the company returned its attention to what Cadillac was supposed to represent: luxury, silence, size, prestige. The 1960s would bring tail fins that reached for the sky, interiors that looked like spacecraft, and engines that grew even larger. But the racing story was over, officially anyway. But the racers remembered. They remembered what happened when that enormous American V8 was placed into a lightweight chassis. They remembered the sound, that deep, thundering V8 rumble that announced the Cadillac's arrival long before it appeared. They remembered the torque, the way it would shove a car forward from corner exit, building speed with relentless mechanical authority. And they remembered that, for a brief moment, a Cadillac engine had shown up in Europe and refused to behave like a Cadillac engine was supposed to behave. Why it matters. That's why the 331 matters. Not because it was the most powerful V8 Cadillac ever built. It wasn't. Not because it won every race. It didn't. And not because Cadillac was secretly running a massive factory racing program. It wasn't. The real story is more interesting. Cadillac built an advanced production V8 for luxury cars. Racers saw something Cadillac wasn't fully exploiting. They turned it into a competition weapon. It went to NASCAR. It went to Indianapolis. It went to Le Mans. It went to drag strips. It went to dry lakes in California. And just as America's horsepower war was becoming one of the defining stories of the 1950s, the manufacturers pulled back. The V8 wasn't banned because it was a failure. The racing environment around it was shut down because the industry had decided the horsepower war had gone too far. And maybe that's the greatest irony of all. The Cadillac 331 wasn't born on a starting grid, but put it there and it suddenly looked like it belonged. The lessons learned from the 331 didn't disappear. They influenced the next generation of Cadillac V8s. They influenced GM's approach to performance across all its divisions. They proved that overhead valve V8 architecture was the future. And they demonstrated that the line between luxury and performance didn't have to be absolute. You could build an engine that did both. Final thoughts. So the next time you see a classic Cadillac from the early 1950s, don't just think about chrome, leather, and white wall tires. Remember what's underneath: 331 cubic inches, a 3.8125-inch bore, a 3.625-inch stroke, overhead valves, 5 main bearings, hundreds of pound-feet of torque, and an engine that racers discovered could be something much more aggressive than Cadillac ever intended. Because sometimes the most dangerous race engine isn't the one an automaker builds for the track, it's the one they accidentally build for the street. If you enjoyed this story, let me know what forgotten American engine deserves the spotlight next. And subscribe for more deep dives into the engines, rivalries, and racing machines that changed automotive history before most people even realized what they were looking at.